Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present. So I think there should be a presentation showing up on the screen via Zoom. We'll see. That looks promising. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm really excited to just be able to share a few thoughts about the experience I've had at the sort of engaging at the interface between religion and Catholicism in particular and astronomy. And I'll give some specific examples, but I think some of the general lessons that I've learned from this is that to take the word dialogue seriously, that for this to be something that's beautiful and effective, it really has to be a two-way street. And that often means that when engaging with religious communities or with secular communities who are interested in some aspect of the religious intellectual tradition, to first make sure that you make distinctions and clear up any sort of perceived conflict that can typically be done by either just purifying the religious claim or help people see that what the scientific claim is might be somewhat more limited than the sometimes expansive ideas that scientists put out. And then the second thing is, if possible, to use the intellectual tradition of the religion that you are interacting with to engage with the science and scientific discoveries that you are bringing to them. And then I think the third step, which to me have been one of the most enjoyable and fruitful one, is then to be open that there's something that you can learn as well and bring back with you into the secular academy. But before going into some specific examples, I just want to give a little bit of motivation of why we should care about having these kind of dialogues to start with. The first is that religious beliefs is very important to a lot of people. And this is especially true if we're talking about the global south. So anything that's showing up in gray to orange on that word map means that people are more than 50% of the population think that religious views are very important to them. The second is that if we understand that the religion is very important to people, that means that religious thought leaders are going to be very important to what ideas people have about reality, and making sure that they then have an accurate view of the material world and how the scientific project can help uncover that is going to be very important. So I just say with the first one, I mean, one of the most important things we're thinking about engaging them with a diverse set of people is they want to remove barriers for people entering into the scientific project, and making sure that we remove any unnecessary conflicts, right? Perceived conflicts between science and religion is one way of doing that. A third is, I said, that there is a very rich intellectual tradition that goes along with basically all the major world religions, and also if you dig into smaller followings, and that there's often things we can learn from them that's really beautiful. And then the final one, and this is more coming from the point of view of someone who has religious beliefs herself, which is that we are exhorted by at least as Catholics, by the Holy Father to go out to the margins. And I think there is something of a spiritual crisis going on in the Western world. And there's two, whether you take spiritual literally or figuratively, and you just think about it as a crisis of meaning and purpose, is what it's often called in the secular world. And that is, if you want to be able to talk to people about the possibility of different faith traditions, you also need to be able to resolve some of the perceived conflicts. I think one of the most effective ways to have these dialogues is to start with the beauty of the culture. So we have seen some of these images before, and again, my gratitude for all the work that has gone in making these. As was already mentioned, I think it's not just what makes these images so attractive. It's not just that they're beautiful, but also that they're true. And there's something in the human nature that is just so attracted to what is both true and beautiful. And that is actually also something that the Catholic intellectual tradition has a lot of thoughts about why, and has been pondering for a long time, why we have that, why we're so drawn in by things that are true and beautiful. But we can't stop, obviously, at these images. We want to then really engage with some of the big ideas that these images reveal. One example, and one of the reasons that the JWST was built, was to better understand our place in the cosmos. It already came up that one sort of version of history that seems to make religion irrelevant is that as history has progressed from, let's say, the 16th century and onward, we have gone from being at the center of the cosmos to just moving further and further out into some sort of just average place of the universe. I think there are two issues with that sort of writing of history. One is that in the medieval imagination that had the Earth at the center, that was actually not the good place to be. The center of the universe, and there was the Aristotelian sort of physics, that's where things were like heavy and gross. And as you went up through sort of the heavenly spheres, you got closer to the divine. But the other thing, and this is coming more from perhaps people of faith who are nervous about this, sort of, that the universe seems to be so big compared to our home planet, is that is a very anthropocentric way of imagining the universe and the God who they believe created it, which is that if the God of the Catholic faith is who the dogma claims that he is, that is someone who's completely other and completely outside of creation, it is no more difficult for him to make a universe that's infinite than one that can fit on a small coin. And I think since one of the culprits behind this whole expansion of our universe is also one of the founders of the place we're sitting in, I thought this would also be a good place to clear up a little bit of other historical, I think, misconceptions about the relationship between science and organized religion. There is a story, I would say there's a myth, that organized religion is sort of naturally counter to scientific progress. And the prime example that's often mentioned is the Galileo affair. Here pictured Galileo together with Pope Urban VIII. He was the one who was sort of overseeing the trial that sent Galileo into house arrest. However, this affair is much more historically contingent than one might typically be known. For example, before he was Pope Urban VIII, this same guy was Cardinal Barberini, who wrote basically bromance love poems to Galileo and to astronomy. And that this whole affair had probably unfolded a bit differently if the Pope did not feel that Galileo had made him look like a fool. Literally, he put the words of the Pope in the character called Simplicius in his dialogue of two-word systems. So lots of big Italian feeling. Okay, in the email, it said 10 to 12 minutes. Is that the timing? Okay, so. But even if this particular story is not something that you know the details of, just the fact that we keep coming back to the same affair should tell you something, that this is maybe not the norm for interactions between Catholicism and the church. So I want to switch gear for the last few minutes and instead give sort of more, I guess, philosophical, theological example of typical interaction that I have. So when we think about the James Webb, one of the things it's doing is investigating the early universe. And that is something that can be seen or like perceived as being in conflict with the teaching of creation within classical Christianity. Here, I think an important distinction to make is that when we're talking about the early universe, even the Big Bang, we're talking about something already existing that's then expanding and changing. While the idea of creation within Christianity is creation out of nothing, and truly, truly nothing. Once you have started making that distinction, it can be very beautiful to then bring the ideas of the tradition, Catholic tradition, into conversation with the idea of the Big Bang as an icon of that creation or nothing, realizing that an icon is an image, it is not, there should not be an equal sign. And there's a long tradition of within the church to like I say, long tradition of understanding that it is not philosophically possible to prove whether we have a universe that's infinite in time or not, but it is a teaching of the church that the word had a beginning, and part of the reason for why we believe God created the universe with a beginning is that that makes the contingency of the universe more obvious to us. And it's that contingency of the universe that must have been in the background as one other famous member of this academy, Lemaitre, first conceived of the idea of the Big Bang, beginning of the universe. Now, Lemaitre was very careful about not mixing theology and cosmology, but yet, if you read his short paper introducing Big Bang cosmology, you do hear the echoes of St. Augustine as he is ruminating about the idea of time being created together with the universe rather than the universe being created in time. And this is St. Augustine basically contemplating the creation story of Genesis. So what I want to end with, last 30 seconds or so, is that the other big thing that the JWST is doing is teaching us about other planets outside of our solar system and origins of life, possible origins of life on those. And here, I think there's another concern that sometimes comes up in religious circles about that if we have a natural origins of life, if we have many other kind of planets, they're sort of removing divine causality out of the picture. And here, I think it's useful to bring back some of the philosophical tradition that has accompanied the church about how, again, if we believe that God is completely outside, of the universe, completely other, then there's no competition between how God acts and sort of natural actions in the universe. Asking whether God caused the origins of life or whether it was caused by chemical reactions is a bit like asking whether Shakespeare or Hamlet killed Polonius. I stole that from someone else. And once you have made that distinction, then I think you're sort of free to start thinking about what it would mean from a Catholic point of view that we might have a universe that's full of life, including potentially other rational. And with that, I will end and just say that if you are interested in hearing sort of more details about mine or other people's musings at this interface between science and Catholicism, here are some of the organizations I've been working with. And with that, I am actually done.